people with real jobs.
Hello?
Self-employed people. Which do you want to be? This is Certifiably Unemployable. It's time to fire the boss and become self-employed. Maybe you need a push to get that business or side gig going that you've been dreaming about for years. And if you're an entrepreneur, you can listen to stories and get experience from people who've done it. Get ready to change your life. Broadcasting from the compound, this is Certifiably Unemployable, and this is Sean Dean.
Welcome to Certifiably Unemployable. I am your host, Sean Dean, and thank you once again for being a part of your busy week. We understand as an entrepreneur or as a future entrepreneur, there's always things happening in your life. So we're grateful that you are allowing us to be a part of your week. And as you're listening to today's episode, this is our part 3 of the mindset with Jared Hanning. And as you're listening to this, I want you to leave comments if you're watching us on YouTube, watching us on Facebook. You can also message us, let us know if you have some comments, things that might concern you when we're talking about mindset. And particularly today, we're talking about how your brain turns language into emotion and how to leverage this for success. So just a little reminder about our guest. Of course, Jared Hanning is a award-winning speaker. He's been featured on ABC Nightline. He talks about mindset performance, and he actually specializes in a Nobel-nominated process that teaches you how to think at a higher level and allows you to access different parts of your brain on demand. Now, remember, this is part 3, so we do have a part 2 as well as a part 1. So if you're listening to this one first, after you're done listening to this, you may want to go back to part 1 and part 2 and listen to those. So Jared has a very diverse background. He's a pilot. He's a very daredevil kind of guy. He likes to jump out of planes nude. He's jumped into 5 states. He's jumped into a football field because he's a licensed skydiver. And I was going to ask for pictures, but that was on the football game one. That's the only one I want to see pictures of, Jared.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. He can juggle 5 balls. That's incredible. And he says on a scale of 1 to 10, the difficulty level of juggling 5 balls would be 47. So that must be a challenge. So one thing I want to ask you is you've got a 2 degree of separation from Kevin Bacon. So tell me about that.
Yes. A friend of mine, actually we worked together for a little while. He was doing kind of moonlight acting gig stints here and there. And he got a gig for a Kevin Bacon movie where he was the stand-in. He was the body double for Kevin Bacon. And so his job was to wear similar clothes and stand in front of the camera while they were getting the shots and everything dialed in. And then Kevin Bacon would come in and do the scene. And so, he got to meet Kevin Bacon and all that. So that puts me 2 degrees from Kevin Bacon.
That's right. That's been a huge thing. The degrees of separation, and really with the internet now, it's even more. I was talking to a buddy of mine the other day, and he's a longtime entrepreneur, and he's really into politics. And he found out the last week or the week prior that he's 2 degrees of separation away from Donald Trump because of one guy that he knows writes books, that wrote a book actually that mentioned some stuff, and he actually interviewed the president. So he was all excited about that. But I think the internet, maybe years ago we were 4 or 5 degrees of separation from somebody. Now because of the internet we're much less. So
much less. It's crazy.
Yep. So that's a cool little fact. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was how did the carnivore diet save your life? I know it has nothing to do with business or mindset, but I think it's an interesting thing. So I want to ask you about it.
Yes. Okay. This is arguably one of the most important things to talk about. I'm very passionate about the subject. So for years, I had trouble with food. I would eat something and just feel bloated. I would eat something and feel exhausted. I'd eat something and have crazy ADD. And sometimes it was easy to pinpoint it, okay, generally speaking, wheat would cause this kind of problem, or dairy would cause this kind of problem, the normal allergens. But sometimes it felt like random as could be. I would eat something that had been just fine for the past 10 years of my life. And then today, suddenly, I'm just laid up in bed all day. And it was very frustrating. This went on for 10 years. Obviously, when something isn't working, you're doing everything you know to do. You're trying everything. So all the stuff, right? The juicing, the fasting, the probiotics, the food elimination diets, that I did the stuff. All right.
Right.
And it was just getting worse and worse and worse. And eventually it reached a point where I was in bed, unable to work like 3 days a week. And then when I was out of bed, I was still kind of unable to work because my head was a total fog. So if you guys are out there listening and you are frustrated by a sense of being exhausted in the afternoon, by not having the sense of clarity in your head, the acuity that you used to, by not having the sense of drive or aggressiveness that you used to, this podcast is for you. So there I was, desperate. It wasn't working. And I remember listening to a podcast by Joe Rogan a year ago, and he had interviewed Jordan Peterson and Michaela Peterson, and both of them were on the carnivore diet. They were eating only meat and water. And when I heard that podcast, I remember thinking, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard. What a horrible idea. Absolutely not. Well, here I am, desperate, and I'm willing to try anything. And I wrestled with this in my head for a couple of days because it seemed so just incredibly insane. It's like, all right, I've got nothing to lose, and what I'm currently doing isn't working. So a couple things about that. When you're learning to ride a bicycle and they just took off the training wheels and you don't have balance yet, you're afraid to crash, and your crazy Aunt Jenny comes by and says, what you need to do is go faster. And when she says that, it sounds like the dumbest idea you've ever heard. Because if you can't balance going slow, how's going fast going to help? Well, this is where our brain is with nearly everything that's going to make a difference. If you take the stuff that isn't going to make a difference, it's going to show up as a good idea. If you take what is actually going to make a difference, it's going to show up as a bad idea. Because the ego, that chemical structured network in our head, is fighting to keep itself alive. And it recognizes on a deep level that if you change the chemical makeup of your brain, you're going to change your thought patterns. And it doesn't want to let go. So those solutions will show up as a bad idea. And that's where I was at. But I was desperate. So I was like, as bad of an idea as it is for me to switch to all meat, I got nothing to lose. I'll try it. And it felt like the most reckless thing ever. This is the same feeling an alcoholic has when they think about going to their first AA meeting. It seems like the worst idea, the dumbest idea. It makes the least sense. Why the hell would I want to do this? This is the same feeling somebody struggling with depression has when they look at taking their first antidepressant pill. It seems like a horrible idea. Why would I do this? The dumbest idea. That's where I was at. But I was desperate. So my first day, I had 2 ribeye steaks with bacon. And I felt pretty good.
Sounds
my second
delicious.
Day, I had 2 more ribeye steaks with bacon. That is all I ate that day. If I was hungry, I would put another ribeye steak on the grill. If I was hungry, I would eat more meat. I'd go get some chicken strips or something. And I did this for 3 days. Now, I felt great the first day. I felt even better the second day. By the third day, I was out of my head. I mean, I had energy all day. My head was, clearer than it's ever been before. But my whole life, I would wake up exhausted. Didn't matter how much I slept, I would wake up exhausted. I started waking up rested, waking up going, you know what? I think I could be done sleeping. Let's get up, start today.
Wow.
My workouts were absolutely insane. Had energy like I just could not work out enough. I couldn't get sore. I would recover just like that. There was no muscle sore. It was nuts the way this transformed my life. Testosterone going through the roof, course, now that I'm in my mid 40s, that makes a difference. Carnivore diet changed all that for me. And so at this point, I'd done it for, 3 days. And I was like, well, it's working. How about I keep doing it? So with trepidation, I just kind of kept doing it, wondering at any minute, something's going to go bad. Like my health is just going to collapse.
Right.
Now, remember, my health was collapsed for 10 years. Here I am trying something different. What the heck? Okay. So then it reaches a point to where I'm still doing it and it's still working and I still feel amazing. Clarity, confidence, certainty. Workouts are great. Energy's great. Sleep's great. Oh my word. And so now I'm like, well, if I'm going to keep doing this, I should probably learn a little bit about it. All meat is a rare thing. We don't have a lot of science on it. You kind of have to go to conferences and read scientific articles by doctors that are researching it. There's just not a whole lot on there. Of course, I mean, you can go to YouTube and watch lectures by, I think it's called Low Carb Down Under. It's a big kind of keto and carnivore conference and just amazing doctors that go there to give lectures. It's fascinating. So I start researching to find out what about kidney problems with being overloaded, processing too much protein? What about vitamin C and scurvy? What about micronutrient deficiencies? What about cholesterol? What about blood pressure? What about gut problems because not enough fiber? So all the concerns that people throw at you when you make a change for the better, mm-hmm. I'm researching them now. What about this? What about that? And the more I researched, the safer I felt eating all meat as opposed to a traditional omnivore diet. I felt safer regarding all of those issues. Now, there are people that have been on the carnivore diet for 20 years, still going strong. I imagine if you're listening, you might be wondering, how in the world can you possibly get enough nutrients in a wide variety for this to be sustainable? Well, one of the reasons it works, and obviously you'll have to do your own research, but one of the reasons it works is because you don't have the fiber in your diet. You don't have anything blocking nutrient absorption. So the trace amounts of vitamins and minerals that are in meat, your body readily absorbs. So in effect, you kind of need less coming from your food because you don't have the fiber blocking it. Either which way, I get my blood tested every 3 months. Cholesterol, all that stuff, it looks exactly the way it did before I made the change. I have been eating, I don't want to say 100% meat, but 95% meat for the past over a year. I think it's been 13, 14 months now. Yeah, I feel like it saved my life.
That's awesome. Well, I do know that I've always had a lot of success with high protein. And one of the things that I did when I went through my weight loss was I focused on protein, focused on meat first. It seems like when I brought carbohydrates into my diet is when you start feeling sluggish, gaining the weight. And, as far as iron and things like that, there's a lot of great high quality supplements out there that enable you to take in your calcium and your iron and all the stuff you need. Because when you do have a heavy focus on proteins and things like that, of course, naturally you do have that concern. But that's awesome, man. And I'm glad you're doing well with it. So super, super cool. So as far as that's a great story. I love it. So if you want more information on the carnivore diet and you want to reach out to Jared about that, I know that's really not what we were here to talk about today, but it all has to do with mindset, because you had to make the decision to do it first off. And there's, so there are some tie-ins to today's topic. So how your brain turns language into emotion and how to leverage this for success. I know that that's something we deal with all the time in business. We all the time deal with having to have the business decision versus the emotional decision. So let's talk about that.
Yeah. How can I help? Where should we start?
All right. So how does your brain turn that emotion, right? If you're thinking about, I don't know if I should do this in my business. It sounds like it makes sense business wise, but emotionally, it's a tough decision. There's so many things that I think about, Jared, when it comes to business, emotion, and business decisions, So from my experience, they always seem to combat each other. They fight. They hurt each other. So what do you advise in situations like that?
Do we talk about performance under pressure earlier this week? Stage fright, performance anxiety?
Yes, we did. That was episode 2. Yep.
Okay, because that's the answer to that problem. Feeling like you have big decisions with a lot at risk and trying to figure out which decision you should make. The solution is take on a bigger problem. The only reason this decision seems significant is because you're not up to something bigger in life.
Okay.
That will fix that. So if you're like, should I launch this business? Should I launch that business? Should I cut this business line? Should I cut that business line or support staff or whatever it is? Play a bigger game.
Right.
Don't solve the problem for you and your company and your family. Solve the problem for all the other businesses your size that are having the same problem. Like write the book on that subject, launch the podcast on that subject, hold the conference on that subject. And by playing a bigger game, it taps into a greater level of resourcefulness in your brain, and you'll find yourself making a lot higher quality decisions with less effort.
Okay. So would you associate the same kind of thing as if you had a situation where, let's say you were a business owner that had employees, you had an employee that really wasn't working out the best for your business. Maybe you had, over the time frame that they were working for you, because you're a human being, they're a human being, you start emotionally caring about that person because you want what's best for their well-being and their family, and they have bills, they've got food they got to put on the table, but they're not working out for your business. And so the right thing for your business is to get rid of that person because maybe they have some pollution that they bring into your company or whatever the case may be, but emotionally you don't know what to do.
Yeah, that's frustrating, right?
Yeah. How do you handle that situation? And because I know that there's people listening right now that have dealt with that. I know for years when I was a business owner and I had a party rental company, in one location in particular, I had a general manager that if somebody needed to be fired, they would handle that because I wasn't good at that. And they're like, well, I can do it. And that was just how now that didn't happen often, gratefully. However, that was never easy for me to do, whether it was needed for the business or not.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. So maybe later on in this conversation, we might get into the exact mechanism that drives emotional response in language, because I think that opens up some new opportunities. Right now, just let me give you the quick and dirty to make those conversations work for you. By the way, the litmus test for your success is going to be your willingness to have uncomfortable conversations, because the more you avoid uncomfortable conversations, the more you are entrapping and weighing yourself down. That's one of the reasons you're not as successful as you could be, because money, it doesn't actually exist. Money is just a byproduct of conversation. Money is a byproduct of an exchange of value. So the more you are having those conversations, the more you're able to traffic in value. You got to fire somebody. You need to renegotiate a contract that's no longer working for you. This is how you do it. We're going to look at two patterns. The first pattern is I would imagine. I would imagine is getting how they're probably going to feel out of the way. This will allow you to have really difficult conversations where everybody's upset, everybody's pissed off, everybody's hurt, whatever it is. This is unbelievably effective with your spouse. It will allow you to have the conversation without the fog of the emotional tension, like being angry and hurt and resentful and all that. You can just have the conversation. And they can have the conversation with you. Like it's ridiculous what happens. So that is, I would imagine. And you're just kind of speculating the emotional state that they're probably in when you bring this up. I would imagine you're going to think I'm the worst boss ever. I would imagine you're probably going to think I'm the most inconsiderate spouse ever. I would imagine you might feel like I don't care. This doesn't mean that you agree with them. This doesn't mean you think they're right. It just means you think this is probably how they're going to feel. Now, for some people, this is difficult. So I want to stress, this does not mean you agree that their perspective is right. It's just, it's their perspective. Right. And you're not trying to correct their perspective. You're not making them wrong because that's their perspective. You're just labeling, I recognize you probably feel this way. You have to, though, you got to commit to it. Like, you cannot make them wrong for feeling that way. And that's the difference between acknowledging how they feel and accepting how they feel. I mean, we're just acknowledging. That's it. So I would imagine you're going to think I'm a terrible boss. I'm going to imagine you think I'm really inconsiderate. I would imagine you're going to think that I don't care about you. Label the emotion. Now, the reason you label the emotion up front is because the way our brain works is it attaches a hidden meaning to the sound that comes in. And this is why, for one person, if you say, hey, looks like you didn't have any trouble getting all 200 pounds dressed for work today. For one person that hears that, they are going to be irredeemably hurt. It's going to send their entire week into a tailspin. But for another person who hears that, they are going to be surprisingly thankful. They're going to be happy. They're going to feel more confident. The words were the same. The difference was the hidden meaning that that person attached to it.
Yeah.
One person, unbeknownst to you, had recently quit a diet that they had tried because they didn't feel like it was working. And for you, when they hear those words, they attach to it, I'm a quitter, I'm a failure, it will never work to me. Another person, unbeknownst to you, had recently started a diet. And when they hear those words, to them, that means, hey, it's already paying off. Look how successful I am. I've only been on this diet for a day. They think I weigh 200 pounds. And it's because of the hidden, unspoken meaning that that person's subconscious creates.
Right.
Now, I don't know. I'm sure as a kid, you did the exercise where you took like a piece of paper and a pencil and you put like a quarter under the piece of paper or a paper clip or something. And as you sketch on the top piece of paper, it creates like a charcoal relief drawing of the object underneath. Well, this is how the brain works when it's processing sound. And notice that if there's a paper clip under the paper, it does not matter what message you try to write on the top piece of paper. It's going to come out looking like a paper clip until you remove the paper clip. Only then can you truly create a new message. And this is the way the brain works. So until you label their unspoken emotion, hey, I would imagine you might feel like I don't care. Hey, I would imagine you might feel like you aren't appreciated enough around here. Until you address it, no matter what you say to them is going to sound like that unspoken hidden meaning. So you got to say that up front, I would imagine. After you say that, you can have an amazing conversation because the act of labeling it, putting it out in the air, takes it out of their filter of the conversation, and they can now hear you for whatever you're saying, as opposed to reinterpreting what you're saying as that hidden emotion. That's right. The first phrase. I would imagine you might feel. I've got a great success story about when I used that in my life, 2 different occasions to turn around what at the time seemed to be impossible conversations. The other phrase that I want you guys to know about is AIR, A-I-R. A stands for acknowledge, I stands for inform. Inform is new information, and R stands for make a request. So this is how it goes down for the employment, hire, fire type situation. Acknowledge the situation. Hey, I'm really thankful that we've had a chance to work together all these years. I think you're great at A, B, and C, whatever it is. Acknowledge that maybe they signed on to work for 10 years and you're 5 years into it. Whatever the situation is, just acknowledge it. Hey, I understand that we agreed to work for this. I understand that we've been working together for the past 5 years, whatever it is. The new information, here's the key, is practical in nature. You can't do both at the same time. So in the employment situation, right now, our company has changed a little bit with some of the new demands and some of the revenue, and we can't keep bringing in this amount of money and keep paying you this amount of money. Like we can't do both at the same time if we're going to stay in business, which would allow us to keep paying you that. How would you like to handle this situation? So it's up to them to solve it. If they want to keep their job, it's up to them to figure out how to make it make sense on paper, because you're showing them doesn't make sense.
Right.
I understand you've been working here for the past 5 years. There's a lot of things we think you do great. Right now, we're in a situation where our incoming needs are this, and we've noticed that your output is this, which means we are losing money over time. How would you like to handle this situation? Now, maybe they come back with something that you absolutely know is not going to work. They're like, well, what if I just try harder? Well, give me a chance. Next month will be different. And you're like, we've had this conversation 3 times already. So you go back into error. Hey, I acknowledge that seems like a good idea. Give them the information. What we've noticed is we've had this trend for a while. This is the incoming. This is your outgoing. And we've had this, we've tried trying harder 3 times now. How would you like to handle that? I'm not saying that this is a panacea. I'm not saying it's going to solve every conversation. I am saying it gives you a framework to navigate hard conversations in a way that don't burn bridges, that cause the other person to understand it's not personal, to not be defensive about it, so that everybody's on the same team.
Right. Because it's not like you're just going in front of the person and saying, listen, your work ethic has changed, you're lazy, and you're not insulting them. You're reframing it to involve them to find the solution. Okay. I like that. That's great advice. Now, what about I had a thought about the other side of emotion with business, because it doesn't always involve decisions with other human beings. I mean, just sometimes it's internal decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think longtime business owners, maybe they fall into a rut, or they might just think that they lost that fire in their belly with their business. A lot of it, I believe, ties into emotion. And so that's where somebody from the outside looking in can help repair that. Can you talk about some situations that you might have experienced with people like that? Maybe they fall into a rut and 100% it's based on emotion.
Sure. What I would say is thoughts are merely passengers in the chemical vehicles that shuttle them around. Thoughts aren't things. They're not real. They're shadows on the wall, a reflection of chemical shifts in your brain. Complicated groups of chemicals we called hormones, but it's still chemical shifts in your brain.
Right.
What that means is when you change the chemical balance in your brain, you change the type of thoughts it can come up with. If you had a can of alphabet soup and you poured that Chef Boyardee plop into the bowl, but you look at the noodles and the only letters were S, A, and D. You had a whole can made up of S's, A's, and D's, and you pour that into the bowl. You would not beat yourself up for not being able to spell happy or confident. You'd be like, but the letters aren't here for those words. I need different letters to make those words. Right. And that's where we're in when it feels like your body's getting older and your clarity and drive and confidence are getting lower. We don't have the letters in the bowl anymore. We got to get the letters in the bowl in order to expect your brain to have the capability of producing clarity, confidence, drive, aggressiveness, that kind of thing. The way we get the letters in the bowl, changing your diet, changing your exercise, changing the things that produce the chemical makeup. Because as your body ages, it becomes less tolerant of a wider variety of foods. Suddenly, wheat becomes more of a problem, or dairy becomes more of a problem. And the problem is it's becoming more of a problem at such an infinitesimally small scale that you don't notice it creeping up on you. So if you want new thoughts, we got to have new chemicals. One way to do that is diet, exercise. There are some other ways to do it, though. Sometimes our brain has a hard time getting clear, having the clarity that it needs. We've tried meditating, we've tried journaling, we've tried going to seminars, we've tried motivational stuff. But at the end of the day, somebody's like, what you need to do is get clarity on your customer avatar. And you're like, I don't really have clarity on my customer avatar. And you've tried all the stuff that they say to try, and it's not working. When our brain isn't clear on something, it's just like eyesight. If you had a friend that was squinting at things far away or holding reading material really close, you wouldn't tell your friend, well, that's right, keep it up. You just need to try a little harder. No, you'd be like, you idiot, get some glasses.
Get your eyes checked.
Eyesight, yes.
Right.
Eyesight isn't a character defect. It's not a lack of willpower or effort. It takes an external reference point. Well, it's the same with our brain. When something is fuzzy, when it's not able to see something, it's not a character defect. It's not a lack of willpower. It takes an external reference point. So in the work I do, that external reference point is mindset pushups. Just like a physical pushup rewires your nervous system and rewires the way your body metabolizes food, a mindset pushup rewires your neurology, rewires the way your mind solves problems. And that becomes like a scaffolding, an external structure that your mind can cling to get a higher perspective on that problem. So mindset pushups are great for solving that problem. Of course, the 4 C's, champion in your life, coach in your life, community in your life, and crucible moment in your life. Those are also very, very effective at solving that problem. As far as the emotional issue attached to lacking drive, lacking confidence, lacking clarity, there is a belief component to that. Believing, well, this is as good as it gets. Well, it can happen for other people, but it can't happen for me. There is, some unhelpful beliefs, and those we clear up right away with mindset pushups, of course. But there's also the only reason you're having the problems you're having is because you haven't taken on a bigger problem. So back to, don't solve it for you, solve it for everybody else who's having that problem, so that you're leaving a legacy, because that allows you to tap into a greater level of resourcefulness in your brain.
It's good stuff.
Does that answer the question, or
No, I like it.
Of course.
I like it because one of the things that I want to ask you is, someone who's been in business a long time, maybe it's a well-seasoned veteran entrepreneur, somebody who's owned a business for multiple years. Maybe they're getting a little burned out with that business, and they're just not sure if it's because they are just over it, no longer excited about it, or maybe they need some internal inventory and need to figure it out. Do you think maybe it could just simply be they need that emotional reset? Maybe they need to change their diet, just change some different habits, because that might be able to kind of recharge their fire in their belly. I mean, is that something that is possible, or typically when somebody is no longer motivated in their business just because maybe they're just burned out, do you think it's just time to move on? What do you think about that?
Generally speaking, if it's not working today, it's not going to work tomorrow.
Right.
Trying harder doesn't work. It just masks the problem.
Right.
Working harder and faster doesn't work. It just masks the problem.
Right.
If it's not working today, it's not going to work tomorrow. If you can't get the work done in 6 days, you're not going to be able to get it done in 7 days. If it's not inspiring today, it's not going to be inspiring tomorrow. So until we fix the system on a small level, we can't look at the big level. The big level being, should I still be in this business?
Right.
The small level is, well, how is your life going right now? Like, how's the quality of your relationships? How's the quality of your friendship? What's the quality of your hobbies, your sense of self-expression and creativity in the world? What's the quality of your sense of giving back? What's the quality of your exercise? What's the quality of your diet? What's the quality of your rest? Rest is where the most learning takes place. What's going on there? I think until it's working on the small level, we can't address the big level. That would be my answer to, should we change businesses or is it something else?
Okay. All right. So we're listening to episode 3 of our mindset, of course, with our host, Jared Hanning, and specifically talking about how your brain turns language into emotion and how to leverage this for success. You're listening to this, you might have some additional questions. I personally think that having a sidebar conversation with someone like Jared, allowing yourself to take advantage of the offer he has given us, or given our listeners, I should say, on getting the executive summary of his book, Thinking Patterns of Success. And then, of course, taking advantage of the mind scan, because everybody obviously has individualized situations where just because have felt it or I've gone through it, I'm not saying we haven't dealt with similar things, but it doesn't mean the solution for me is the same as yourself. As I mentioned last episode, I did a mind scan. Jared and I are going to be reviewing that over the next couple of days, and I'm real curious to see how that plays out. So I would encourage you to do that. I'm going to leave a link on here so you can take Jared up on that offer, as well as take advantage of that, and so you can understand more about his book, The Thinking Patterns of Success. So as far as this topic, Jared, before we wrap it up, is there anything else you wanted to mention?
When it comes to how your brain turns sound, language, music into emotion, if you can slow down the response time. The response time is, you heard them say those words and you're instantly angry. You heard them say those words and you're instantly hurt. And because it happened instantly, it creates the illusion that what they said, didn't say, didn't do, caused the feeling. But there's something that happened in between, which is your brain had to give it a meaning, a reference point, a purpose. So ask yourself, what did that mean to me? That will give you a much greater access to freedom and power in those relationships and conversations, because you're taking control over the emotional response, which opens up a whole new dynamic in that conversation. If you want to learn more about that process, check out my TEDx talk in Hickory, North Carolina, Jared Hanning, TEDx, Hickory, North Carolina. That will give you better access to controlling those conversational dynamics.
Now, is that something we could find on YouTube, or is that coming up? Okay.
YouTube.
Okay. Perfect.
Yes.
Perfect. Do you have anything else coming up in the future where you've got some, there's not a lot of things happening live right now because of the state of the pandemic. Hopefully that will change here soon. However, do you have anything coming up that is not pre-recorded that people can look forward to?
Best case to catch the current state of the conversation around mindset performance would be my podcast, Mindset Performance.
All right. Sounds good. Jared, we appreciate you being a part of it again. Thank you. We've had some great episodes, some great discussions. You're definitely a man of knowledge, and I look forward to having you on Certifiably Unemployable again in the future.
Rock and roll. Thanks for having me.
Even if you're not on the podcast, I know this is a relationship that I want to continue because I feel that that we connect in many ways, not just with the performance side, but a lot of similarities in age and different things. So I know you got more hair than me, but don't rub it in. So it is what it is. All right. Don't forget to leave your comments. Don't forget to let us know what resonates for you in this episode. We want to make sure that we guide these episodes to properly help you become self-employed or become a better entrepreneur and make sure that you are certifiably unemployable. Until next time.
You've been listening to Certifiably Unemployable. Ready to fire the boss yet? You're on your way. Sean has been self-employed for over 20 years. So if that's something that you want to do, something you've been dreaming about for years, Sean has all the knowledge, good, bad, and indifferent. We hope you've gotten some useful and practical information from this show. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hook up with us on Facebook and Instagram at Certifiably Unemployable. Find us on YouTube and at www.certifiablyunemployable.com. Till next time, this is Certifiably Unemployable, signing off.